What's up, everybody? It's Cody with OakleTreeOrdinance.com, and the Universal Background Check Law was just introduced in the House and passed. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Welcome to the Saturday Night Gunfight. So what is the Universal Background Check and what does it mean for you? Basically, anytime you go and buy a new firearm, you have to have a background check. If you're buying a gun from a licensed gun dealer, you fill out a sheet with all your personal information on it, and that gun dealer then submits it to the FBI and finds out if you're allowed to buy that firearm or not. If you are, in Texas and most other states, we get an answer back that says you can buy it. You take your gun and you leave that day. In some states, they've got a 3 to 7 day waiting period, regardless of what the background check says. And so, if this law is passed, from that point going forward, everybody will have to do a background check every time they transfer a firearm. So that means if your granddad wants to give you his old 270 deer rifle, he's got to take it to a gun dealer. Y'all got to pay a fee. The gun dealer is going to run that background check and give that gun to the grandson. Or you buy a gun for your wife for her birthday or Valentine's Day or Christmas or whatever you're buying her a gun for. You come in, you buy the gun, and you do the background check, the gun's in your name. And then you go and give it to your wife. You can't just give it to your wife like you can now. Now that's not a straw purchase, that's perfectly legal to give a gift. Under the new law, you won't be able to do that anymore. So here's a little stipulation in that law that most people have overlooked. That gun has to be in your possession. It can't be in anybody else's possession. So if you want to give that wife your gun, that's now illegal. If a friend calls you up and says, hey, I'm going hog hunting this weekend, but I don't have a rifle. Can I borrow yours? And you say, oh yeah, come get my rifle, have fun. You can't do that anymore because that firearm is not in your possession anymore, and the background check hasn't been done to transfer that gun to your friend. So now y'all both committed a crime. Here's another for instance. Say you've got a family member that has a giant gun collection and he passes away or she passes away and wants to leave it to their heirs in the will. Now the heirs can just get the guns and take them home with them. Can't do that anymore under this law. As soon as they pass away, everything in that gun collection will have to be brought to a gun dealer or a licensed gun dealer to be held, because nobody has possession of those firearms that's done a background check on them. And now everybody in the will that's inheriting those firearms could be some old lever action, a museum piece from the 1800s, one of the original Winchesters. Doesn't matter, has to have a background check on it. So all those guns would go to a gun dealer and everybody would have to come in individually and do the background checks to get the guns. Now let's talk about if this national background check is actually going to work. And there's a way we can do it, because you can look at states that already have it. California already has it, New York already has it, Massachusetts, I believe, and Oregon already have the mandatory background check. And if you talk to all the law enforcement agencies that are in control of managing that system, they'll tell you it doesn't work. Okay, let's take a look at several reasons why this universal background check isn't going to do anything to deter crime. Number one, there are certain states that already have the mandatory background check for every firearm transfer, whether it's from a dealer or from a private party. And if you talk to those law enforcement agencies and they testified in front of Congress, in front of their state houses, and they all say the same thing. The mandatory background check system does not work because we don't have a national firearms registration. And the reason that is because today's March 5th. Let's say the law goes into effect today. From this point going forward, every firearm has to have a background check done before you can do the transfer. From March 5th going back, any private party sale could be transferred without a background check. Last time I checked, there's roughly 350 million guns in the United States of America. Give or take, that's just kind of the rough estimates that are out there. Those 350 million guns that are on the street right now can be transferred without a background check through private party sales. That's why it's impossible to track and know when that gun was transferred. Let's say the law enforcement agency comes to me and says, hey, or to an individual, not to a gun dealer like myself. They come to John Doe and say, hey, John Doe, we're looking for this gun. And he says, well, I sold it to a friend of mine 6 months ago. So there's no record of that firearms transfer. Therefore, the mandatory background checks don't work because the law enforcement agencies don't know if John Doe sold that gun on March 4th or March 5th when the law went into effect. Okay, the second reason that mandatory background checks aren't going to work is because criminals don't buy their guns. They steal their guns, they trade drugs for their guns, and that's just the fact of the matter. The reason I can say that with such definity is because of the FBI uniform crime statistics. What those are is every year, every law enforcement agency, from a small town with one cop all the way up to the Department of Defense dealing with all the military stuff, they turn in their records for crimes. And it's everything from, misdemeanor, speeding, all the way up to murder, rape, and the worst crimes out there. And the FBI takes all those statistics and they compile them in a report that's the FBI's Universal Crime Statistics. And what those statistics show is that guns that are used in gun crime are almost always stolen firearms. So somebody breaks into a house, they steal a gun, they take that gun, they sell it on the street. Another way I know that criminals don't buy their guns at gun shows and that they don't buy their guns from gun dealers is because the FBI went out and they had a big study where they went to prisons all across the country and they interviewed people in prison that were specifically there for gun crimes. Not people there for drug dealing, not people for any other reason other than gun crimes. And they asked them, hey, where'd you get your guns? I stole them. That's the overwhelming answer. How'd you get your gun? I stole it. I bought it from a guy who stole it. Criminals aren't coming into gun stores and buying their guns. They're not buying their guns from individuals. I'm sure that there are some, but that's not where the overwhelming that's not where the overwhelming amount of guns used in crime are coming from. Okay, now let's talk about the gun show loophole, because that's what you hear talked about a lot. With this bill with mandatory background checks is going to close the gun show loophole. Well, here's some facts about gun shows. I've done a lot of gun shows. I'm sure there's people watching this video that's gone to more gun shows than me. And one thing that you'll notice is it's predominantly gun dealers in there. The overwhelming amount of people that are in there are gun dealers. Matter of fact, there's even statistics on it. Depending on the state you're in, the gun show you're at, you're looking at anywhere from about 87 to 95% of the people selling firearms at gun shows are federally licensed gun dealers, which means that they have to, by law, run a background check on you. If they don't, they can lose their license, they could be fined, they could be thrown in jail. There's a bunch of bad stuff that can happen to gun dealers that don't run background checks. So, the myth of MS-13 gang members going to gun shows and buying hundreds of assault rifles, quote-unquote assault rifles, is a myth. There are individuals selling guns at gun shows that aren't licensed dealers. There are individuals selling their personal firearms. You see them walking around, they've got a rifle slung over their shoulder with a sign on it that says Remington 700, 308, and all the details and what they want to buy on it. Now you'll also see a few people sitting there that they've got a table. They got a table, they might have 20 or 30 guns for sale, and it's got a sign on it that says private party. And you go up and talk to those guys and you'll be like, hey, are you a gun dealer? Are you private party? And they're like, no, I've got my gun collection. I buy, sell, and trade all the time because I'm always selling old stuff out of my collection, getting new stuff into my collection. And that's all perfectly legal. All right, now let's just talk about gun control in general. Because it's 2019 and the Democrats have gone nuts with gun control. Late January, early February, you had Senator Dianne Feinstein introduce the 2019 assault weapons ban. That's going to ban, honestly, it's going to ban thousands of guns. Bans 250 guns by name, and then bans so many parts and pieces and individual characteristics that it takes a huge amount of firearms off of the shelves of gun dealers. I already shot a video on that. You can get on my YouTube page and go back and look at what it means, what guns are going to ban, specific characteristics, stuff like that. Today we talked about the universal background check. What's next? Well, gun control always goes off the previous law. It always stacks on top of itself. You ban assault weapons, you put in the universal background check. Step 3 is going to be firearms registration. And the Democrats talk all the time about what they want. There's some Republicans who are soft on gun control. They talk about that is what they want. And it's coming. The universal background checks have already passed the House with 8 Republicans supporting it. I honestly doubt that it's going to pass the Senate. But if it does pass the Senate, you can't have faith in President Trump to veto it. Because when he released a statement on it, he said, I may veto the universal background check law. And that's pretty soft language when you're talking about a big piece of gun control like that. So I'm pretty sure the Senate is going to kill this bill on arrival, that it's not going anywhere in the Senate. But the Democrats aren't done. And the gun control lobby isn't done. The next thing that they're going to push for is going to be a national firearms registration where everybody has to take every gun that they own and go register it with the federal government. And I can't tolerate a society that's going to do that. No society that's registered all their firearms hasn't ended up banning them, hasn't ended up doing gun confiscations. I mean, you can look at California. California put in a mandatory background check. Then they put in registration for assault weapons, which they got a pretty weak definition of what assault weapon is in California. And then you can go and look online now and find videos of guys whose sheriff's department showing up at their house and confiscating their firearms that they thought they legally owned, that they thought they had registered. And when the cops are coming to take their guns, they give them a citation to go to court and say, well, you can petition the court to get your firearm back, but right now we're taking it. And so what are you going to do in that situation? I mean, if you register your guns, you're setting yourself up to have them confiscated. All right, everybody, that was just a little rant. I know I said I'm going to try and stay away from politics, but sometimes you just don't have any choice. Now, I said earlier this week that I was going to do a video on pig hunting, and so that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to get away from politics, and we're going to get back to hunting, rifles, outdoors, fun stuff like that. But everybody remember, elections have consequences. If you're a fan of the Second Amendment, owning firearms and the shooting sports in general, hunting, everything like that, you got to pay attention to not just what politicians say, but what politicians do. Because in one more election cycle, the Second Amendment could be devastated. But that's enough politics. Everybody had a good weekend, and we'll see y'all next week.